Unsung Sluts. I'm Tabitha Davis.
And I'm Stacie Rasmussen. This is our first podcast ever.
For those of you joining us out there on the internet, this podcast will be dedicated to historical figures that are mostly female. We'll probably talk about a few dudes, but our main goal is to educate people on unsung sluts, women whose stories are either undertold or not told at all. And this will obviously be an irreverent approach to history. So if you're offended by words like slut, bitch, cunt, pussy, maybe don't listen.
Fucks. We give a lot of fucks.
We do.
We give a lot of fucks on this subject. Basically, this is what happens every time Tabitha and I get together and have coffee and talk about history, because we both love history. We're, dyed-in-the-wool feminists in the good way, where we celebrate it, and no, we're not saying that, Amelia Earhart was a slut, but if she was, we don't care.
Yeah, actually, so for me, the word slut, I want to take it back, because oftentimes the word historically has been used to diminish women who are strong, who are secure in their own sexuality. And to me, those bitches are my heroes. I feel like it's time that we take that back. Our approach to feminism is maybe counter to a lot of the feminism that's going on right now. But
We're
I
not
feel like that's
man-haters.
okay.
We love men, and men are out throughout history. And I don't want to go all cliche and be like, oh, let's do her story.
Right?
But it kind of. And also the women that we want to bring to you are women that you may not have heard of, because they get overshadowed by maybe the men who did the same thing or a similar thing or came after them and did the thing.
Yeah. I think so. When I was growing up, I never really felt like I didn't have female role models. We had Amelia Earhart, we had Sally Ride, we had Harriet Tubman, Laura Ingalls Wilder. There were Madeleine Albright, lots of women to look up to. But as I got older and started educating my kids at home, I realized that there were a lot of women I should have learned about, and nobody thought to tell me about them. So those are the women that we're pretty much going to focus on. So you'll be hearing about women that you maybe haven't heard of before. Hopefully haven't. Well,
right. And or we may bring a different perspective, because the part that we love about this is doing the research, and even doing something as simple, well, not simple, but Hidden Figures, the movie that just came out. Like, that's not even that long ago. Mm-hmm. But we didn't hear about those women, because what we hear about is the grander picture. But the talk about standing on the shoulders of giants to get where we are today. It's because of those women that the space program thrived as it did, and they deserve their fucking due.
Right?
So that's what we're doing.
So we're going to sing their praises.
Yeah, and hopefully people that are interesting to you, that you haven't heard of a lot of, or maybe we can give you a different insight or information that you haven't heard about them. Right. So that's what we're about. So get a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, or,
a shot of vodka
or a bowl, and come along and play with us.
Yes. Okay, so the way this is going to go is Stacie and I have educated ourselves separately, and so we are going to introduce each other and you to these historical figures. And I decided to go kind of far back into history. My actual goal was to write about the first historical woman, the first woman who actually appeared in historical text.
Ooh, I like that.
It was actually a challenge, because a lot of the references to quote unquote historical women are biblical in nature, and we're trying to stick with confirmed data here. So while we may later talk about biblical stories and religious text, that's not going to be where we start.
Yes, because there is some female-centric mythology that doesn't get talked about a lot, and I think we will have episodes on that.
Yeah. So I chose someone who, if you live in certain parts of the world, is not an unsung slut. In fact, her praises are sung widely in some places. But I hang out with a lot of nerds, and I've mentioned her several times to these nerds who are well versed in history, and been pretty surprised that nobody knows who she is. And I feel like she's kind of somebody that everybody should know who she is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Boudicca, also referred to as Boudicca, depending on how nerdy you are, I guess, who was she was a queen in the 40s, just 40s, not 1940s. And she led one of the largest, actually the largest, uprising against the Roman occupation of the British Isles.
What?
Yeah, so it's pretty fucking dope. And so I have some notes, so I'll probably read some and then, ad-lib a bit. So
okay,
so
lay it on me.
Boudicca. I think Boudicca's better because it's like
Let's
booty.
just call her booty.
She got some booty in there.
I like that.
She was born in 30. By 18, she had married the Iceni king, whose name I'm going to butcher, Prasutagus.
Okay.
And shortly thereafter, or actually like maybe the same year, history is kind of sketchy, especially when you're dealing with people who didn't really care so much about writing it down. Right around the same, she was married about 18, right around the same time of the Roman invasion of the islands. So the Iceni people kind of kept their distance from the Romans. They didn't participate in trade with them. They kind of kept to themselves. They didn't want any trouble from the Romans, but they weren't trying to be like best friends with them or anything. So eventually, the king, Prasutagus, decided that he would work with them. They became forced allies. So they agreed to share some of their land and, whatever they produced on that land with the Romans, sort of in like paying the tax, but maintaining his power. And actually he was one of the few kings who was allowed to maintain his position. But the, sorry.
No, go for it.
So, this guy here, Suetonius Paulinus, he was a Roman governor of Britannia at the time, and he was getting a little irritated. There had been a couple small uprisings, and he wanted to put his foot down. So he went to a holy place.
I love your note there. Go back. Go back a page. Here's Tabitha's note. She led an uprising. Oh wait, that's getting too far ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, she eventually she gets sick of their shit.
Yeah, you get sick of Rome's shit.
So this governor goes to this island. There's a druidic temple. These, like the stereotypical idea of like druidic, priests and their robes and everything. And he fucking kills everybody. He destroys their temple. And during this battle, Boudicca's husband is either killed during the battle or dies shortly after. There's not a lot of evidence.
But battle related?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he dies. Now, Boudicca was, according to some historians, she may have had some druidic training. She may have been sort of like not necessarily a priestess, but she certainly was educated in the religion.
Okay.
So this is like, this guy just destroyed her temple and killed all of their priests.
Yikes.
So when the will is read of her husband, he leaves his property to his daughters and to Rome because he owes allegiance to them. But he did this in hopes to maintain peace. He didn't want war with Rome because he knew that would mean war for his people, and he was trying to keep his people safe. But Boudicca don't play that shit. She was like, fuck that noise. They fucking destroyed my temple. They killed my husband. And she's not super happy with this.
Right.
But to make matters worse, this guy, Dicey-Anus, his name is actually Decianus Catus, but I'm going to call him Dicey-Anus.
He's Dicey-Anus.
Yeah, so he
Dicey
decides while the Suetonius Polonius is off destroying druids, that he's going to go and put his foot down more, probably in hopes that he would get promoted, thinking that this attitude was actually going to be appreciated by the governor. But what he did instead was cause a war. Oh. So he goes in and is like, not only are we not going to give the land to the daughters, because according to the Romans, women do not get land. They're not entitled to that.
Right.
So even though the Essenes were an equal people, the Romans weren't. So they didn't honor the will.
Okay.
In fact, they didn't just not honor the will. They came in, took everything, publicly flogged Boudicca, and raped her daughters in front of the people.
What the fuck?
Yeah, they're fucking assholes. So this guy Tacitus, he wrote about it. His father-in-law was part of the quelling the uprising. Okay. So he had kind of a first-hand account. By historians, his is considered the most accurate. There's another guy that wrote about it a little bit, but he kind of gets flowery, so a lot of historians don't listen to him. So what Tacitus writes is, kingdom and household alike were plundered, like prizes of war. As a beginning, his widow Boudicca was flogged and their daughters raped. The king's own relatives were treated as slaves. So needless to say, Boudicca is not going to take this laying down. She already hated the Romans. They've basically been in power her entire life. At this point, she's approximately 29 years old.
Wow. And the Romans are not like a small faction.
No. Yeah. No. And they've taken over, they've also taken over her home, like her birthplace, her city of birthplace. And basically are like in charge of all of the southern part of the UK, which is today would be the UK.
Okay.
So she goes to her friends, who are some other tribespeople who have also been keeping their distance from the Romans, and is like, we can't take this laying down. This has got to stop. They can't just, we have done everything that they've asked of us. Right. And they come in here and they rape my daughters and they take my shit. And it's like, no, it's not going to happen anymore.
Okay. So
she gets together all of the tribes that will join with her. There are several tribes that are beholden to Rome and are okay with that. Tacitus writes, exasperated by their acts of violence and dreading worse calamities, the Essenians had recourse to arms. The Trinobotians joined the revolt. Neighboring states not yet taught to crouch in bondage pledged themselves. So she leads this army. And one of the cool parts about this is that to the Essenians and to the other tribes that joined her, this was not a strange thing to have a woman leading the army. Wow. It was not an unheard of thing. And in fact, in a lot of Atticus's writings, he talks about the fact that the armies were not just made up of men. There were equal parts men and women. And when they went into the first city, which is Camulodunum, which is where the term Camelot comes from in the Arthurian legend. Yeah,
that's fun.
So that's the first place they go, which is coincidentally Boudicca's birthplace. So she was born in Camelot. Okay?
I like that.
Right? It's kind of cool. It gives you like a little bit of a goosebumpy.
Yeah.
Okay. So she goes. First, she promises revenge before they even leave her home. Okay. That she's gonna. They better watch their backs. So she comes in. She leads the uprising, and she rains down so much destruction that there is, to this day, if you visit the site of this battle, there's a layer. They call it the destruction layer, because they broke every window. They knocked down every wall. They slaughtered every person, men, women, and children. They beheaded them. They crucified them. They they did some fucked up shit to women, let me say. I'm just like,
Yikes.
I mean,
Yikes.
it was women doing it to women, so it was like woman on woman crime, but like still, she basically was like, if you people are going to come to my house and rape my daughters, then you obviously don't care, and so I'm not going to care either. And so she went in there dedicated to cause mass destruction, and she burned the city to the ground.
Wow.
And then she burned 2 more cities to the ground.
So she just kept going.
She kept going. So Verulamium and Londinium, which is London, burned to the ground. Both still have...
Is that the first of the London burnings?
Yes.
First of several, like 6?
Yes.
Yeah.
So to this day, archaeologists will still find this layer of destruction that was caused by her just taking out these mofos. So she and her army killed approximately 80,000 people in total, estimated. Of course,
in
like
just
based on
this kind of siege.
In
does
but
it
all
like span?
No, yeah, it's all 3 cities if you count all 3 cities. So
how big was her army?
It's hard to tell because Tacitus is really the only one that gave a good historical account of what happened, and he's telling it secondhand. Like he's interviewing somebody who was there and getting information and then kind of trying to estimate. So even the number of 80,000 Romans is still just an estimate. There's when they went into the cities, when they go into the destruction area, the destruction layer, it's just a mass of bones and pottery and broken pot, and it's all mixed together. Like they just went and just jacked shit up. They were full of rage. And
just like your dog.
Just like my dog. Yes. She's a crazy bitch also. So there's another little funny point. So Decianus, who fucking started all this shit because he's an asshole, he fucks off to fucking Gaul. Like the second that the Britons rise up, he's like, peace out, and leaves it to this other Roman general who just was killing druids. Now he's got to come in and kill this army of women. And really, when it came to how they encouraged the Roman soldiers, they used that. If you read everything that Tacitus writes, he talks a lot about the fact that every rousing speech that's given is basically like, these women are kicking your ass. Are you going to let that happen?
Oh.
And that was the driving force behind them fighting back, was that these women, just like lowly women, were messing them up.
And I've seen that so often when I've done my research on other women that we'll talk about. But even like Virginia Hall, who was a spy during World War II, and one of the most feared, that they brought that up. It's like, this woman is doing this to you. So I kind of wear that like a badge of honor. Yeah. As well, because, but at the same time, it's like, what, we have feelings, we have passion, and, you know, we have some power.
And this is also a woman who was never told that she was not equal to a man.
Right.
This is a woman who grew
in society,
up. Yeah.
She wasn't.
She, you know, for her to have war training and all that, I mean, she wasn't exceptional, except for the fact that she was willing to take a risk that most, if not all, of the men who were ruling at the time weren't willing to take. Right. Her husband had participated in a smaller uprising probably before they were married, which was quashed pretty early on. Yeah. But there isn't a lot of accounts of other men really standing up and trying to fight against Rome. And then the Roman ideas really take over, where you see women's property rights and things change in the UK because of Roman rule. So that matriarchal or like more equal society is basically like erased by Rome. And of course, like we all know, Rome likes to do that.
Right. So was it only women that she was with, or was she leading an army of
She was leading an army of her people, which included women.
I'm getting these visions of like Amazonian
tribes.
And
actually she's been described as an Amazon by historians very often, although I learned in researching this that Amazon specifically were women who lived in Africa, And so the Amazon, we'll probably do an episode on Amazons too.
Yeah, we'll have to, because I just realized how much I don't know.
Yeah, and I was
Amazon.
like, oh, I didn't know that.
I figured, probably South America.
Yeah.
Amazing Warriors, South America.
Yeah. I know. So it's like, I guess it comes from a word from a country in Africa that I don't know, because I also don't know enough about countries in Africa.
Stay tuned.
So I'm going to read Tadicus's account of the battle because I think it's awesome. And, okay, so here we go. Boudicca, in a chariot, with her 2 daughters before her, drove through the ranks. She harangued the different nations in their turn. Now, some historians argue that this is all conjecture by on Tadicus's part, because he wasn't there, and it's only kind of likely that his stepfather would have understood her because she would have spoken a Gallic language or a Celtic language. Okay. And so this could be just kind of assumptions.
Sure, but
or
if I have someone driving a car down the street and they're obviously telling me in their own language to fuck off or something. Yeah, exactly. You get the gist of it?
So you kind of get the gist of what she's saying. So also this paints like a fucking awesome picture. Okay. She harangued the different nations in their turn. This, she said, is not the first time that the Britons have been led to battle by a woman. But now she did not come to boast the pride of a long line of ancestry, nor even to recover her kingdom and the plundered wealth of her family. She took the field like the meanest among them, to assert the cause of public liberty, to seek revenge for her body seamed with ignominious stripes, and her 2 daughters infamously ravished. From the pride and arrogance of the Romans, nothing is sacred. All are subject to violation. The old endure the scourge. The virgins are deflowered. But the vindictive gods are now at hand. A Roman legion dared to face the warlike Britons. With their lives they paid for their rashness. Those who survived the carnage of that day lie poorly hid behind their entrenchments, meditating nothing but how to save themselves by an ignominious flight. From the din of the preparations and the shouts of the British army, the Romans even now shrink back with terror. What will be their case when the assault begins? Look around and view your numbers. Behold the proud display of warlike spirits, and consider the motives for which we draw the avenging sword. On this spot we must either conquer or die with glory. There is no alternative. Though a woman, my resolution is fixed. The men, if they please, may survive with infamy, but live in bondage.
Oh, shit.
So she also, I love how she's such a queen that she's like talking about herself in third person.
Yeah.
Until the end when she's like, you guys can do what you want, but I'm going to fight. So this is cool until the fact that like, she and her daughters were able to escape the battle. This speech was given at the beginning of the final battle, which she lost. The Romans claimed 70,000 were killed and only 400 of their own. Tadicus speculates that she consumed poison to avoid capture. And
took one for the team.
Yeah, most historians believe that she and her daughters escaped and killed themselves to avoid whatever torture the Romans were gonna lay on them. So for the most part, her story is kind of lost until you have archaeologists starting to kind of dig around and look underground and find things. Also, when Tadicus's accounts were discovered in Rome, that brought to light that this woman existed. During the British Renaissance, called the English Renaissance, but I'm going to still call it the British Renaissance.
You do you.
Okay. And during the Victorian era, she was acclaimed, and several statues have been erected in her honor, mostly with her riding to battle on her chariot. Weirdly, without her daughters, which is kind of, I don't know what that's about.
Not without my daughter.
And Tennyson actually wrote an epic poem about the battle. I was going to read it, but I read through it and realized that there were many Latin and Gaelic words that I would butcher horribly.
It was a bit too epic for our podcast.
Yeah, it's super epic.
But what's it called? And then people can go look it up.
It is called...
And if we ever get something like a website for this. We'll post
we'll post
stuff
links.
like this and links and cool stuff.
So it's called Boudicca.
Oh.
So
a poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson.
yeah, and then there are also several movies or movie accounts of her. And I think actually what's that girl from Pirates of the Caribbean, there was one made recently. And actually there's been kind of a resurgence, not since the Victorian era have people been talking about her as much as they're talking about her now. And, which is cool because I knew a lot about King Arthur and the Arthurian legend, which are made up nonsense, and not enough about Boudicca, who was a real, live, actual person who really, stood up and fought for her people, and then I guess killed herself. I like to think that maybe she didn't kill herself.
Yeah, but what are you gonna do? Go to the aisles and knit for the rest of your life?
Yeah. I can't imagine that she would.
It's an epic ending to an epic story. Plus, if the Romans did capture her, I would hate to think what would happen to her.
Yeah,
and her
daughters. And I think that's exactly after what had already happened to her and her daughters, and the kinds of punishments that they had seen inflicted on their people, which much in the same way that pioneers took to scalping. The Britons used crucifixion and Roman forms of punishment in this uprising.
I'm having visions of Braveheart.
Very similar, yeah, except that he was fighting the English.
No, I understand that, but I remember one part of the movie that stuck with me.
Yeah.
I can barely tell you any parts of the movie, but I remember a red hot poker.
Yeah. Oh, there are, Tacitus writes about accounts that when they went to sack London, that the Roman the Roman governor came and was like, if you want to run, I'll help you out. And the people who stayed were mostly women and children. And at this point, the Iceni army was not taking prisoners, and these women were put on pikes. And he very gently says that the pikes were inserted long ways into their bodies, and I'm pretty sure that they had a very specific entry point.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about vaginas.
Special for us women.
Yeah. So, some of what she did was war, and it was dark and bloody and horrible. But the fact that she refused to back down without a fight, I think is really awesome. And I'm really surprised by how few people know who she is.
Including myself. It's shocking. I am a student of history. I've learned a lot, and especially, who we are. We're drawn to these sorts of stories. So, yay.
All right.
Good one.
So, now it's your turn.
Now it's my turn. Okay. Well, the person I'm going to talk about is not as epic as yours. And I think I have to begin. I think this story usually has a kind of, at the end, surprise.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you the surprise up front. And then I'll have another surprise for you at the end. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about Charley Parkhurst, known as Stagecoach Charley or One-Eyed Charley or Cock-Eyed Charley. And the big aha moment is Charley's a woman. Okay. And Charley was born Charlotte Darkey Parkhurst in 1812 in Vermont. And her mother died 6 months later. And then her father died soon after that. So she went to an orphanage. And from all the research I've done, she hated it there. As you probably
They're pretty
would
notorious
in
for sucking,
1812. And so she ran away from the orphanage at age 12. And so this would be 1824. And she had to fend for herself. And so she decided one way to do that was to dress as a boy, because boys were allowed to work. So she dressed up as a boy at that point, and adopted the name Charley instead of Charlotte, which isn't a huge stretch, of course. And according to some accounts, Parkhurst met this guy named Ebenezer Balch, and he owned a livery stable in Rhode Island. and he took in what he thought was an orphaned boy and returned to Rhode Island and treated Parkhurst like a son, taught him to work as a stable hand, gradually started working with horses. And Charley, I'm going to say she, because it is she in a lot of accounts, even though they'll say, so it's a girl dressed as a guy, addressed as he throughout the article. He did this, he did that. I'm not going to do that. It's Charlotte. So she learned how to drive a coach. First with 1, then 4, and eventually 6 horses, which is pretty incredible. And she worked for Balch for several years and met this other guy named Birch, who will come back later on. So in 1848, seeking other opportunities, Charley, who's now in her late 30s, left Rhode Island and sailed from Boston to Panama. And they had, that's what they had to do to get to the side. Yeah. We don't think about it now. We just think, call United and go. But while he was there, met John Morton, returning to San Francisco, where this guy Morton owned a drayage business.
Oh, yeah.
So
Fancy horses,
yeah. So Morton recruited Charley to be a driver. And
how about that, guys? A female driver,
right? Of 6 horse carriages. Like think Wells Fargo. Okay.
Actually, I'm thinking she'll be driving 6 white horses when she comes. When you said that, that's what comes to my mind.
Yeah, she'll be driving 6 white horses.
Right? That comes to mind. I wonder if
I wonder if that's her.
Yes, we should find out.
Okay, we'll do some research on that one now. Shortly after reaching California, Parkhurst lost the use in one eye. She got kicked by a horse. And that's how she was known as One-Eyed Charley. So then she went to work for Birch, the guy that she had met back in Rhode Island, where he developed a reputation as one of the finest stagecoach drivers, known as a whip. Probably because, they used a whip. And
now, does finest stagecoach mean fastest? Like, is he getting?
No, it's not just that. It was safest. It was fastest, because time is money, even back then. And you were driving people and goods. So if you're hiring me to take your shit up to San Francisco, you want to know it's going to safely get there and quickly. Okay. And let's see, I can skip that. So it was called the Great Stage Route. It was from San Jose to Oakland, San Juan to Santa Cruz. And they did mail as well as passengers, and they had to deal with a lot of holdup attempts and bad weather, perilous journeys, all that kind of stuff. Primitive trails. And what Charley was known for was not to be fucked with. Like she'd cut a bitch if you tried to take her stuff. And in fact, the famed Black Bart tried to rob her, and of course thinking it was Charley, a man.
Right.
And so she pulled a gun on Bart and got him to walk away, and then shot him in the ass.
Oh.
Yeah. So I kind of love her.
Just so he knew not to come back.
Right. So she also, early on, she had throat cancer or a tongue cancer. And it made her have a more grovelly voice, which it worked into the charade of her, posing as a man. They said that she was like, I think she's kind of built like us. She was about 5'8", about our weight. Which I'm not saying. No, but she's a well-built, like, strong woman. And the only difference that people kind of said, she's that guy that doesn't have a beard. So that was the only thing, because mustaches and beards were huge back then. So huge back then.
Oftentimes when you hear stories, historical accounts of women disguising themselves as men, I'm thinking specifically of Jack Rackham's girls, Anne Bonny and Mary Read. These women still have sexual relationships with men. They reveal themselves to a close few. Is there any evidence that she had?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
I will get to that.
I want to know her sexual history, Stacie.
Well, I did read an account that people have looked into this and looked into letters and looked into other... one person found a woman whose grandmother knew Charley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and said Charley was gay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That makes it easier.
And then other people said, like, more than gay, actually trans.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
But it is entirely speculation because she never wrote anywhere about that or really talked about it. Mm-hmm. She was described as a stout, compact figure, sun-brown skin and beardless face with bluish-gray eyes. And wore one patch over her left eye and was suffering from cancer of the mouth. I've heard tongue and I've heard throat. Mm-hmm. But it gave her a really
she did chew.
Throaty, gruff. Yeah, maybe. Mm-hmm. But, you know, what's the doctor going to do?
Yeah,
you know,
cut out your
do
tongue,
cocaine about
much.
it. You
yeah,
know,
exactly.
That's all you can do. Here's some cocaine. She drove a team for almost 30 years, enduring the rough, winding roads and occasional holdups. On one occasion, a bandit called Sugarfoot, which I want to see what he looks like. I love this Sugarfoot guy, ordered Charley to give up the strongbox, and she obeyed, but was determined to settle the score. As luck would have it, Sugarfoot stopped the stage again on the same route. This time, Charley shot and mortally wounded him. It's like, I'm not falling for that shit again. So she eventually, after doing this for 30 years, retired from stagecoaching. And with the reputation of being like the best in the business. You wanted Charley as the whip. Mm-hmm. So she finished doing that and then decided to become a lumberjack. Because she's just badass. Mm-hmm. But she had to stop because of rheumatism. And again, they say cancer of the mouth. I don't know if it's a recurrence or she just dealt with this for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. And then she died on December 29th, 1879. And it was then when her neighbors came and, you know, and she also did other stuff. She did farming. She did lumberjack farming and raised chickens. They keep talking about these chickens that she raised. And she died. And of course her neighbors came over to get the body ready for burial. And that's when they opened up her clothes and was like, uh-oh, boobies. Uh-oh, vagina. And so no one knew. And that's the gotcha of the whole story. Uh-huh. But in this podcast, I can't be talking about this guy, Charley. Like, obviously we're talking about women. But it was a huge deal because no one knew. Mm-hmm. So that's when it became a sensation in the newspapers and even reached the New York Times.
Because at this point, she's already has an established, story. Like, people know who she is, and she has
So her obituary.
What is the word?
Reputation?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, we do that a lot. Sharing a brain, we share words a lot. So her obituary was in the San Francisco Call, and then it was reprinted in the New York Times in January 9th of 1880. And the headline was 30 years in disguise, a noted old California stage driver discovered after death to be a woman. And it's actually written like that. After discovered is a period. And then after death, period, to be a woman. Period.
Bum.
Yeah. And
they could have used an ellipsis there.
They really could. Or just a sentence.
Yeah.
This amazing person was a woman.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm going to read you a little bit.
Could you believe a woman
can
drive a coach?
Yeah. Last Sunday, December 28th, 1879, in a little cabin on the Moss Ranch about 6 miles from Watsonville, Charley Parkhurst, the famous coachman, the fearless fighter, the industrious farmer, and expert woodman, died of cancer of her tongue. She knew that death was approaching, but she did not relax the reticence of her later years other than to express a few wishes as to certain things to be done at her death. Then, when the hands of the kind friends who had ministered to her dying once came to lay out the dead body of the adventurous Argonaut, a discovery was made that was literally astounding. Charley Parkhurst was a woman. So, yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
I think, the interesting thing is that their reaction is like, can you believe that a woman did this? And I'm like, I can't believe that she was in disguise for 30 years as a woman. I mean, if she was transgender, then yeah, she's living as a man. She is a man.
But
she's
without hormones, she's not like going to the doctor. She's not.
So,
she's just doing the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
also boobies. But I guess fashions of the time kind of made it easier, would make it easier to hide. Also,
the unexpectedness of it. Like, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. And boobies.
So no one's looking for it.
Yeah. This article in the Times back in 1880 noted how unusual it was that Parkhurst could have lived so long with no one discovering her assigned sex. And to quote, this is going to piss you off, to achieve distinction in an occupation above all professions, calling for the best physical qualities of nerve, courage, coolness, and endurance. Have you not seen a human come out of our vaginas?
Yeah, these people have obviously never met a woman.
And that she should add to them the almost romantic personal bravery that enables one to fight one's way through the ambush of an enemy. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would say, like, and like that point that they're making even more over is the fact that in her profession, she's under attack. She's getting robbed. I mean,
right.
But we as women have the unfortunate addition of, like, a guy worries about walking down the street and getting mugged. A woman worries about walking down the street and getting raped and murdered.
Mugged and killed.
Yeah. So for her to put herself into a position that's already dangerous, even for a man.
Right.
Right. She's also taking an additional risk, because if she is discovered, especially in the 1800s in the Wild West, it's a pretty rapey time. Right. Pretty rapey place.
And you're out there with no one.
With no one but your vagina. You know, like, she's actually braver than a man because of this extra risk that she's taking.
Yeah, because there's places like, turn left at Rapey Junction and
exactly.
go a few more miles.
And I've driven through Watsonville, and no offense to Watsonville, but, like, I'm pretty sure, like, there's some places you don't want to walk around in Watsonville at night now.
Right.
Right. So that's, it's interesting.
And there's electricity now.
Yeah.
But to your point, nowhere could I find that she had a significant other
of
either gender. Okay. But the autopsy revealed she had been pregnant.
Had she carried to term?
That's what they couldn't tell. Her autopsy showed enough that it showed she probably gave birth.
Wow.
But
she had no living children with her.
She had none that were ever spoken of.
So for 30 years, at some point in her 30 years, she spent 9 months pregnant and gave birth to a child.
Yes.
And no one ever knew she was a woman.
Right.
That's amazing.
And when they were going through her things, because she's in her little cabin, and they opened up like this hope chest, and there was like a christening gown in there.
So maybe she lost her child?
Yeah, another thing said that they didn't think that the child lived very long.
Yeah, it was kind of a rough time. Also, if she's hiding the child.
Also, if she bound herself. Like, that can't be good, right? Like, if you bind.
Yeah, well, I mean, women during the Victorian era often continued to wear corsets, and actually they had special corsets that were for pregnancy. So they managed to...
Okay.
Maintain pregnancies. But again, we're talking about Victorian era. You also have a high rate of infant mortality.
Compounded.
Yeah.
Also, you're probably not supposed to ride a horse while pregnant.
Probably not.
And she's probably still whipping.
Yeah.
Okay. So I promised you a surprise.
Okay.
So, in 1868, what were women totally not allowed to do?
Vote.
Yeah.
Oh shit, she voted?
She fucking voted. Okay,
yes.
So she was on the official rolls. Charley Parkhurst was on the rolls for voting in the presidential election.
So she's the first woman to vote?
She's the first woman to vote in the presidential election. Just got chills again all the way up and down my legs.
Oh, that's awesome. I wonder what she voted. You think she voted left?
I don't. Well, okay.
Oh, back then actually it might have been right?
Fair,
'Cause, like, didn't they, like,
right.
switch at some point? Yeah.
So she is on the rolls, meaning I am registered to vote, but then I think they just like made X's on pieces of paper and threw it in a box. So there's nothing like with her signature that says I vote for so and so. But if you're going to go so far as to register to vote, I have to think you actually voted.
Yeah, and that she cared.
Right.
Because like, even today, people can vote and they don't vote. So, like, my assumption is that back then, like, you're riding stagecoaches, you don't necessarily care about who's in charge.
Right. So there's a plaque on the fire station in Soquel, California, that marks the site where she would have
I was just
road
up
trip.
there.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
So there's a fire station that has a plaque reading. If I can get through this without like crying, because this is like
I'm
near
like
and
goosebumps.
dear.
I have like goosebumps.
I'm so glad because as I was doing this, I was like, I hope that she finds this as fucking cool as I do,
So
because
cool.
her person is fucking rad.
Yeah.
And mine drove horses.
No, but still.
Okay. The fire station in Soquel, is it Soquel or Soquel?
So, how do they pronounce it?
It's in California.
Soquel?
Has a plaque reading, the first ballot by a woman in an American presidential election was cast on this site November 3rd, 1868 by Charlotte Charley Parkhurst, who masqueraded as a man for much of her life. It was a stagecoach driver in the Motherlode country during the gold rush days and shot and killed at least one bandit. In her later years, he drove a stagecoach in this area. She died in 1879. Not until then was she found to be a female. She is buried in Watsonville at the Pioneer Cemetery.
Oh, same road trip.
Yeah. So there's also now a monument that was erected in 1955.
Nice. A statue of a woman?
Yeah, by Pajaro Valley Historical Association. And it's at her grave. And that reads, Charlie Darky Parkhurst, 1812 to 1879, noted whip of the Gold Rush days, drove stage over Mount Madonna in the early days of Valley. Last run San Juan to Santa Cruz, death in cabin near the 7 Mile House, revealed One-Eyed Charlie, a woman, first woman to vote in the U.S. November 3rd, 1868.
Wow.
Okay. And then in 2007, the Santa Cruz County Redevelopment Agency oversaw the completion of the Parkhurst Terrace Apartments, named for the stagecoach driver and located a mile along the old stage route from the place of her death. Which, okay, like if you have you seen those pictures where it's like a World War II picture in Paris? Yeah. And then they overlay a today picture? I just want to overlay like her driving her stagecoach and behind her is her fucking apartments.
That's so cool.
Like, because back then you wouldn't even be able to really wrap your mind around modernness that we know today.
I also love that the reason that this is a person who did something that was, I mean, pretty cool, riding stagecoaches and stuff on these rough roads. I mean, like, even now those roads are like backwoods, windy, whatever, you know?
Yeah.
But it's the fact that she is a woman.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Oftentimes it's like, this person is a great figure, you know, but also they're a woman. This, it's like, and she's a woman. That's the big thing, is the fact that she is a woman, you know?
Yeah.
I love it.
Like,
I love it. That's so cool.
Of course we can do this stuff.
See, this is what I'm talking about. This is what drives me crazy.
Yeah.
I learned about the stagecoach drives. You do like a whole in California.
In California,
if you guys are
from
California,
grade,
yeah.
You
so
do California
you do like
history.
a California history thing, and a lot of it is the El Camino Real and the stagecoaches and all of that sort of thing.
A lot of the Spanish, a lot of Father Sierra, a lot of that kind of
mission
stuff. The missions,
yeah. So you learn about this specific time in history, and never once was this woman ever freaking mentioned.
I know.
What the hell?
I only found out about her because when I was doing Toastmasters, our very first packet that you had to do to like get to the next level was 10 speeches. And I decided, even though one was like a comedy speech and one was a historical and another one was change my mind on something, I said, every single one, I'm going to introduce a woman that you people have never heard of. And so this was one of them, and I was able to do a deep dive and find out more about her.
So cool.
Yeah.
I've never, I have like a vague recollection of learning about, like, hearing about this person, but not
Probably from me.
Yeah, probably it was from you.
Yeah. Because this was years ago that I did that Toastmasters.
Oh yeah, then it was probably
yeah.
But the fact that she was the
Autry.
first woman that voted, that's so cool.
That to me, that is the not so much that she was a woman.
Yeah.
You know,
no,
for
but
everyone
the fact
else,
that she,
that's the thing.
But the fact that she used her privilege to represent. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I don't think it was even
she
privilege.
Didn't even,
it was survival.
No, but I'm saying, like, the privilege of the penis. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
And as the 1800s, like, again, not man-hating. We're just talking about the facts,
the POP, the privilege of the penis.
That's right. Like, you guys, you dudes out there, you know you have it. You know it's, like...
for them to... Here it is. If she came to the guy, Balch, that took her in and said, here I am in my frillies, please hire me to sweep out your stables, he would have said, no, go knit, go sew.
Well, to adopt a girl,
or go,
it's just like throwing your money down the drain.
Right.
Because you can't really do much with her except marry her off. And if you are not really well off, you're not going to marry her off very well. She's just going to cost you money.
And in some things that I saw, she saw that boys her age were able to make a few bucks and to survive.
My question is how she lived with this guy. I mean, I have kids. I have a daughter. So like there are, bath times and things like that. And so like you see your kids in various stages of undress, right?
She would just have to be
but like, as a boy, like, would it be weird that she wasn't like
let's go pee in this bush?
Question. Yeah. So my question is like, one, how did she avoid the standing up peeing thing? And then, which I know that there are tools that women can use.
Yeah.
So like maybe did she have something like this? But also my biggest question is how did she hide menstruation? Because she was 12, 13 years old when she gets adopted, very close or already starting menstruation.
You would think.
So, like, how did she? I mean, I guess you'd have to ask her, and you can't. But
yeah, those things are lost
how
to
she
history.
would hide it because it's you have bloody rags. Even then, they were just rags and stuff, but you'd still have to get rid of them. Yeah. So
maybe she did confide in a few people because other reports said this wasn't such a huge aha moment for those that knew her. Knew her. And obviously she got close enough to fuck someone.
Yeah, right?
So, and
or
no one has
raped.
ever said, could be. Well, either way.
Yeah.
She was
Somebody
impregnated.
did something, yeah.
Right. But there's not a lot about her. There's the Autry museum that we have up here. They had a series of programs and events titled Out West. Mm-hmm. Get it? Out West.
Yeah.
And it was back in 2009, 2010 that included exhibits, lectures, films, and other material about homosexual, bisexual, and transgender people's contribution to the Old West. Mm-hmm. And they talked about her. And then other people have done fictionalized biographies. Mm-hmm. And
so that's another question is that when once she kind of made a name for herself and had some money, she could have lived as a woman if she had chosen to. She was established to the point where she could probably have already purchased a home for herself and maybe had money to support herself.
She did, but she kept being Charlie.
So then that does open the question: was she more comfortable living as a man?
Was she trans?
Was she a he?
Right.
In which case, then she would be presumably the first transgender person to vote, maybe.
What they're saying is the
still
first
awesome
amentomically female to vote.
Still awesome.
Oh, it's still incredible.
It's so cool.
I want a video of her walking into that place. Was she shaking? Did she know? Because it's not till 1920. Mm-hmm. It's not till 40 years after she died.
Yeah, this is something that I drive home with my kids all the time. The year that my grandmother was born, her mother couldn't vote.
Yeah.
That's how close it is. And it doesn't seem like you have a lot of people who don't really give a shit right now.
Right.
And it's crazy because it's that's a big deal that we get to do that. Women were beaten and killed to prevent them
And
from having the
force-fed.
right. Oh yeah, they tortured them.
Yeah.
It's fucking bullshit.
We
We'll
did
probably do an episode
we will
on
do
them.
suffragettes, because when we were watching the British comedy Up the Women, we did a deep dive and found out about force feedings and just horrible fucking shit that these women went through.
Yeah, they totally whitewash in history. When you read history, you see pictures of Susan B. Anthony fighting the good fight and
yay for
whatnot,
them.
and like,
Yay
yeah,
for them.
great,
That's awesome. But there is a seedy underbelly.
Yeah.
That
what was done to
doesn't-
try and stop them.
That doesn't get talked about, as there is for every movement.
Yeah.
I'm sure every political, social change, it doesn't come easily, and it comes with a lot of blood and turmoil and horribleness.
Well, good for her though.
Yeah. So that's
really
Charley.
cool,
Charley's
and
one of my
that's California
favorites.
history. So woo woo.
Yay! Yeah, you did some British stuff. I did some California stuff, and hopefully, as we do these podcasts, that we do bring very different people each time, because I like spanning the globe and spanning time.
Yeah.
Because this is rather recent in the grand scheme of things, and yours is from like 30.
Yeah, 30.
Which blows me away.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Alrighty.
That was fun.
That was our first episode.
I learned a lot. Yeah, first episode of Unsung Sluts.
Hopefully you learned something new and come back for more.
Yeah.
I guess. Like greedy sluts.
Yeah, like the greedy sluts you are. Yeah. Stay slutty.
Yeah.